Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And our senior editor, Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Okay, night two of the Democratic National Convention concluded at the absolutely 9 to 5 hour of 11:43 as opposed to 12:31
or 12:31.
Yeah, whatever it was. No, 12:31 I think was.
Did you make
Trump's
it? Did you
speech.
finish Obama's speech?
I made it through.
I couldn't make it.
Through.
I think I missed the last 5 minutes or so.
Well, it's interesting because something interesting happened in the last 5 minutes, but we decided that we were going to try to go chronologically through the evening to talk about what happened and why it should, I think, send a shiver through the spines of everybody at Mar-a-Lago and in the Trump campaign. And I think we can start that conversation assuming that most people didn't watch it the way we watch it. I mean, I literally was watching it on C-SPAN from, 7 o'clock until the concluding part of the evening. So I wasn't being interrupted by pundits and interviews with people on the floor and all that, just like straight through. And the Democratic Party last night pulled off an absolute coup of a pop culture experience, turning what is ordinarily, unless you are a wild political junkie, an extremely tedious moment in conventions into a joyous, genuinely joyous, upbeat, fun, unexpected hour of television, and that was the roll call of the states. An entirely unnecessary event because in terms of the rules of the Democratic Party, the roll call of the states assigning the delegates by state to the Harris-Walz ticket had already taken place on a Zoom call last week or the week before last. So she had already become the official nominee of the party according to the delegate allocation that is represented by the roll call of the states well before the convention actually convened. The roll call of the states is actually the only moment that mattered at a convention ever, but when a convention actually chose the candidate, the roll call of the states is when the candidate was officially chosen. Primary system, of course, changed that. So it's a foregone conclusion usually when the candidate shows up. So they didn't even have to have it, and they had it. And Abe, what would you say about the roll call of the states?
It was like a dance party, It was the second the DJ showed up and
DJ Cassidy,
started announcing
in a bright blue suit,
who has apparently DJ'd every convention since 2012.
Really?
Yeah, according to the New York Times, he's a veteran.
There we go.
But the interplay between him and the very enthusiastic secretary.
Yes, Josh Ray was the name of the secretary.
Yes, Josh Ray would come out and he would ask each state how they voted, and then DJ Cassidy would play the song that, in a collaboration with the state delegation, he chose to best represent that state.
And that
I hadn't realized that it was a roll call. I thought I was watching the Super Bowl halftime show.
Abe said that this, aside from Doug Emhoff's speech, which we'll get to a little later, that this was the only Jewish moment at the convention, right? And no one mentions Israel. No one will talk about Israel. Chuck Schumer won't say the word Israel. Everybody is very nervous about mentioning Israel because they don't want booze. But this was a Kamala Harris's bat mitzvah, I think. Is what you said.
Rachel Maddow said it was a bar mitzvah, a 50th birthday party, and a quinceanera all rolled into one. I thought that was a pretty good description.
Yeah. So
I also,
yeah,
I just want to say one of the other thing about the roll. John, you said you were watching, the entire. Not everyone watched the entire convention like you on CNN from beginning start to finish.
hardly anybody probably.
Right, beginning with the roll call because of its nature. The convention sort of became to me like background music, not in a bad way, by the way, as something sort of fun and lively you leave on to breathe life into the room, kind of thing. That's what it was like. Yeah.
Look, the upshot of this completely superfluous roll call, which could have saved us a lot of time, and I could have gone to bed much earlier had they not done it, was that it got the crowd very excited. But unfortunately, it made Chuck Schumer dance. And so Schumer was the speech that followed the end of the roll call, and he came out dancing a jig, which was some combination of the, Elaine Bennis dance from Seinfeld and one of those clown puppets you see on the highway where the air is shooting up and the clown is bending in different directions to advertise, a tire repair shop. So it was, as our friend Matt Labash.
I am never getting that image out of my head now.
That was Schumer. And as our friend Matt Labash said in the New York Times today, it was, a bridge he'd never thought politics would cross, Chuck Schumer dancing. But as Labash also added, that's a bridge he wants to blow up and never see again. Because
by the way,
the image was so disturbing.
It is very important to me, given that commentary has a historic role as the Jewish magazine created to explain America to the Jews and to explain Jews to America, to point out that Chuck Schumer, one of the many shameful aspects of Chuck Schumer was that he would give people the idea that Jews can't dance. And this is an infamy and a shanda. I want to point out, very importantly, that the greatest choreographer in Broadway history and considered one of the great ballet masters of the 20th century, Jerome Robbins, was born Jerome Rabinowitz in Hoboken, New Jersey. Very important. Michael Kidd, the choreographer of Guys and Dolls, of Hello Dolly, of many Broadway shows, himself the star of It's Always Fair Weather and the movie Smile, a great American choreographer. All over the place. Jews can dance. Chuck Schumer, among his many liabilities as a Jew, can't dance.
Paul Abdul is Jewish. And so I don't know why she isn't who you immediately think of. Instead of Schumer, I think everybody thinks of Paul Abdul as when they think of Jews dancing.
So I think many people don't know that. But I'm just saying that our people deserve more than being associated with this rhythmless, embarrassing display of bad dancing.
But it was exemplary of Schumer's mood, because he is feeling so good about the Democrats' chances in November, not only at the presidential level, but in the senatorial level. Now, I think he's giving a false picture to his fellow Democrats here, because we all know that the Republicans basically start with one seat earned in their race to regain the Senate, which would bring the Senate 50-50. And the polling in Montana, right, that's the West Virginia seat with Governor Jim Justice, soon-to-be senator, bringing his bulldog, baby dog, to the U.S. Capitol, which I'm very much looking forward to. So that's 50-50. And if Harris and Walz win, it means that Schumer does control the Senate, because Walz would be the president of the Senate. But the polling in Montana is not looking good for incumbent Democrat John Tester. And Tim Sheehy, the Navy SEAL who's running against him, is doing well in the polls. That would bring it to 51. And of course, there are many other races too. But so I think Schumer painted kind of a false picture, but what is he going to do? It's his convention, and they're all so excited about Kamala. And they had all those great tunes to get us all, moving and rhythmically bopping and hopping.
It was great. And then you had the surprise appearance of Lil Jon in the Georgia delegation doing Turn Down for What? So you did have a little moment, as kind of a dance break moment with if you're going to have Lee Greenwood at the Republican convention, you can have Little John doing Turn Down for What at the Democratic convention, and doing it, moreover, in a not static, interesting way. Now, I have two more things to say about the roll call, which one of them is delicate, and I don't quite know what the political implications are, but the overall overwhelming effect of the roll call of the states was to tell you that the Democratic Party is a party of women and of minorities. Now, Republicans have been playing the game for 25 years, or, let's say since the 2000 convention, of pretending to be a party of women and minorities at their conventions. They have as many minority speakers as they can possibly have. They have as many female speakers because they have a liability. They had a liability but they wanted to, let's say, assure white middle-class voters that they weren't racist and that they weren't misogynistic. And so there was the soccer moms, and you have the keynote speakers always being women and Hispanics and Black people and all of that, just like a parade. But it was always an interesting way of trying to mask a political liability, which is that the Republican Party is an overwhelmingly white party, at least electorally. There was something very different about this, because you were going from delegation to delegation, crowded in front of the mic, right? 30, 40 delegates that you could see in the shot. And it's a party of women and minorities. Like, I would say it really did look like men made up the minority of the delegates on the floor. And
that might be actually true.
Right. And very lively, enthusiastic, fun delegates of color. And it's an interesting transformational problem. I think you really have to be a deep political person to have been watching the roll call of the states, or someone who is deeply interested in politics. So maybe it doesn't matter that much. But the optics are interesting, because one thing we know from all of the polling over the course of this year is, while you may hear that it's very important for Kamala Harris to get the Black vote up, and she really needs women to be fired up because of abortion, what they need is white voters in the Rust Belt blue wall states where they are underperforming.
There wasn't much last night for those voters.
Right. That's what I was,
there wasn't much the first night for those voters.
Right. So, but I thought that there wasn't much programmatically the first night. Last night, it was one of those things where, now that we live in a state of racial consciousness and sort of counting by race, in which white people are now figure in a way that they didn't a generation ago. That could be like a long acting fact, that it's like, this tribe is not my tribe, or this party is not really my party for a lot of people. Again, maybe I'm overthinking it, because maybe 2 million people watch the roll call of this, of course, across America. I don't know anyone.
Well, I think that's the general impression, roll call or not. But I do think that, they're going to they're going to take a shot, those voters, tonight. They've decided that tonight is white male night sort of thing. So I think we'll see tomorrow, if they've done that. But tonight is where they're going to actually try to take a shot at that and see if they can carve out a space for that demographic in the party, in the not just the Democratic Party, but in the party in the sense of the word. It's a party like it was last night. They want to see the Chuck Schumer bopping along, and they want to see folks who love Tim Walz bopping along, and they're going to take that shot tonight with Bill Clinton.
So that's a good segue to the next part of the evening, John. If we're ready,
sure,
to
go ahead.
To that. Okay, so after the roll call and after Schumer came out, the campaign addressed the question that I had yesterday on the podcast, which is, how were they going to manage Kamala's separate rally in Milwaukee while also having the convention programming. And the convention managers had a plan for this, which is they introduced Harris live from Milwaukee. And I thought this was an absolutely fascinating part of the convention for a couple of reasons. The first is Harris came out on the stage. It was in the same arena as the Republican convention was held last month. It was packed to the gills. The staging is superb. I mean, they are turning her into a cultural figure, a status that I do not believe she deserves, but nonetheless, I can recognize this is happening. And she comes out, and what is she talking about? She's talking about freedom, opportunity, and optimism. She's talking about an opportunity economy. She's not talking about equity. I don't think that word has passed the lips of any speaker I've seen at the DNC, and certainly not Kamala Harris's. And it occurred to me that rather than practicing the policy triangulation of the Clinton years, where Clinton would just steal Republican issues and portray them as his own and benefit, Harris is engaging in rhetorical triangulation. She's taken the rhetoric of the Republican Party and appropriated it for her own use. Her policies haven't changed, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the rhetoric is the same rhetoric you heard in the old Republican Party. Freedom, opportunity, optimism. This is what she's talking about. The Constitution. I've heard more about the Constitution in the past 48 hours that I had in quite some time. You know, Hillary Clinton was quoting Article 2 and the Take Care Clause. They're talking about the Constitution and about Trump's awful statement a few years ago that the Constitution should be suspended so that they could replay the 2020 election. It was just a remarkable moment. And I wonder how long she'll be able to continue this rhetorical triangulation.
If I can just dip back. So I think this is a habit going back for decades in the Democratic Party, and it's usually been associated with loss, by which I mean 1984, you guys are too young to know this or remember it, but 1984, the Democrats had a problem. Democrats were not viewed as a particularly patriotic party, and Ronald Reagan had reignited a spirit of American patriotism. And so the Democratic Party, in an effort to respond to this problem, also because the Olympics had taken place in Los Angeles in the summer of 1984 and had been this kind of explosion of pent-up patriotic frenzy. So when Walter Mondale took the stage at the 4-day convention, it was like you had a house that you had wallpapered with American flags. There were 10,000 American flags in, I believe it was New Orleans, if I remember right. And it was just flags and people shouting USA, USA, which is, by the way, a phrase that, I know it's not a phrase really, but that was basically invented at the 84 Olympics. And so they were trying to deal with the liability by stealing the imagery of patriotism, but they couldn't get the rhetoric down. So, you know, the idea was we're patriotic because we're collectivists. That was Mario Cuomo's famous 1984 speech. Similarly, John Kerry, 2004, problem, Democratic Party protesting the war. So what do? They nominate John Kerry. John Kerry comes out, and what does he say at the beginning of his speech? I'm Lieutenant Kerry, reporting for duty, and with a big salute, right? And I don't think anybody bought it. No one felt it. This was more interesting. Like, I think maybe the rhetorical capture, because it wasn't just Kamala. There were a couple other speeches in the night, including Barack Obama's, which we can get to if we keep going. But one thing I will mention, which happened not all that further along than Kamala's moment in Milwaukee, was Ken Chenault, the former CEO of American Express, who did something that Mike Pence did in 2016, not only at the convention, but during the course of the campaign, which is that he described a Kamala Harris and her economic policies that bore no relation to Kamala Harris and her economic policies. To hear Ken Chenault talk,
right.
Kamala Harris is a kind of supply side.
A total. No, I have more on this too.
Yeah.
But, you're absolutely right. I just on the Kamala Walz rally, I had two more observations.
Yeah.
First is I finally figured out who Tim Walz reminds me of. There's a meme going around of him resembling a character, I believe, in the show Schitt's Creek. I'm not sure, but this kind of local guy who's always kind of running into a scene and his arms are waving as he always seems like he's going somewhere. He's always excited. But watching him with Kamala at the Milwaukee rally last night, it occurred to me he's also like an Ed McMahon. You know, he's like the sidekick. He's like the Hank Kingsley. He's the sidekick on the talk show, because every time she would say a statement, he would, he does the nodding dramatically and he claps and his hands are always going to his heart. I watched him as they exited. He has these jazz hands. You got to get out of the way with Tim Walz and his jazz hands. He's going to knock you over. He's going to give you a concussion. He's waving to everybody. He's pointing so much. It's so ridiculous. But I realized I'm ready for him to say, "You are correct, ma'am." During say, yes, giving that kind of Ed McMahon support to the leading figure, Kamala Harris.
That is, by the way, what got him the job, according to a lot of reports, is that he sat down and he said, "What do you need? I'm your cheerleader."
It's incredible. I mean, I've never seen a running mate kind of in this role. It's goofy. It's absurd in some ways.
And she's taken to automatically calling him Coach Walz, right?
Oh, Coach. Yeah.
Coach Walz. Yeah.
Get Coach Walz. Yeah. Okay. So that's
really
observation
defensive
one.
Coordinator Walz would be.
He was the assistant.
The assistant coach.
Okay, fine.
And while he had his DUI, by the way.
But that, by the way, that goes to the patriotism thing too. That everybody's mentioning, because of the comparisons to Friday Night Lights. That is a very American show. Friday Night's high school football.
First of all, this is a good point that somebody said to me yesterday. I don't understand how this happened. In my life, from what I remember, if you were a cool person, you hated the high school football coach. Unless you were on the team, the high school football coach was a jerk, and everybody hated the high school football coach. And then I was like, no, this is the problem. Kyle Chandler on Friday Night Lights, which was not a hit show when it aired on CBS and then I think on DirecTV or something. But Kyle Chandler completely revolutionized the image of the high school football coach as some kind of secular saint who was the only person who cared about the suffering teenage boys in East Texas. And Walsh, of course, Walsh had no resemblance whatsoever to Kyle Chandler in Friday Night Lights, because he looks like Carl in Up, or
I missed the episode.
Old Ed Asner.
I missed the episode where Kyle Chandler took the kids to the People's Republic of China and talked about how communism is sharing, and anyway, so I missed that episode.
No, he's Kyle Chandler, but he looks like Buddy Garrity. There you go.
And acts like Ed McMahon.
That's my Friday Night Lights.
So that's going on. They're having the rally in Milwaukee. Yeah. Everybody's happy. When they showed the video feed in Chicago, people reacted. But my favorite moment, and see, John, I'm watching the MSNBC coverage, so I'm not watching the unfiltered version like you are. But on MSNBC, they continued showing Harris and Walz on the left side of the screen, while on the right side of the screen, they brought out the next official speaker, Senator Bernie Sanders, who in, this inside-out emotional epic that we're playing out in this convention is, either anger. He's a combination of anger and the id of the Democratic Party. And so on the left side of my screen, I'd watch Harris dip in and out of her rhetoric about opportunity and hope and joy, and we're so happy. And on the right side of the screen, I'd listen to Bernie Sanders go, and Kamala Harris is setting up for an agenda of taxing the millionaires and billionaires and the price controls, and we're going to abolish Citizens Unite. It's everything the Democrats wanted to keep hidden during this week is out in the open in his ridiculous voice. So I thought that contrast was very revealing. And this, I think, what's more likely to happen should Harris and Walz become president and vice president is the Sanders agenda is what we're going to get, even while right now we're hearing the joy and the happy warrior.
You know what else I noticed about Sanders' speech? It was things have turned around and it's going well. And that in Sanders' typical, sort of old Brooklyn yelling form is not the two seem to clash. It's like oil and water, but it was actually Kamala has been running, the price of chicken is up 50% and the price of milk is up. And, we've on day one, we've got a plan to fix all this. And Bernie Sanders got up there and said, thanks to Kamala's administration, we have cut child poverty by 40%. It was like a list of things they've already accomplished. And that I thought was an interesting contrast too, because Kamala's not doing that.
Right. Well, I was struck imagistically by Sanders because it's the Joy Convention. Has Bernie Sanders ever smiled? I'm honestly, it was striking. He is like Castro or communist. Stalin. He is but I mean, he is as serious as a heart attack at every given moment. There is one moment in his entire career as a major American political figure where he did something sort of unexpected and fun, which is when they showed him shooting baskets. Do you remember this?
Yes,
in 2020.
He's good. Yeah,
and he was stunningly good, particularly for I mean, and so that was like, where did this come from?
Jews can dance and ball. Jews can dance and ball.
Right. There you go. Okay. Yes, he was like the City College team in 1937, which is what he looks like now. But
it was just remarkable to have him sandwiched in between all of these speakers. And of course, one of the biggest applause lines he got in that arena was when he demanded an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East, right? Everybody got, oh yeah, Bernie. Yeah. So I'm just saying that's what you're looking forward to. Beyond all this joyful rhetoric we've been hearing and we'll continue to hear for the next 2 days.
And then what happened? Yeah,
exactly. And then what's even funnier is he's followed by two after going on and on about the oligarchs and we have to go after big money and big pharma and big ag and big meat and big sports. And I mean, just big. Who he's followed by J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, who in his speech used his personal wealth as a cudgel to attack Donald Trump and said, take it from an actual billionaire.
Yeah.
That Donald Trump is bad with money or something. I forget what it said, but it was like a herky-jerky motion here, as bad as Chuck Schumer's dancing.
Right.
Yeah. Going from Sanders to Pritzker.
We are going to destroy Citizens United.
Get the money out of politics.
Rich people. J.D. Pritzker has spent $350 million of his own money running for office in a single state, in the state of Illinois. $350 million in two different elections. $350 million. We're going to destroy Citizens United.
But you know what a lot of people don't realize about J.B. Pritzker is that his popularity, it rides on a wave of love from the socialists. He's like a pinup to the socialists. He's like if they were in prison and they were carving a tunnel to
he got out, huge applause when he identified as a billionaire.
The
crowd applauded him. Yeah. But the remarkable thing about Pritzker's speech was, and this gets to what you were saying, John, about Kamala as the supply side economist. J.B. Pritzker was saying that Kamala Harris and the Democrats are for cutting taxes and balancing budgets. He's the governor of Illinois, which is known for huge deficits and high taxes. It's the complete inverse of the reality. And yet it just leaves me, a kind of a puddle. Yeah. It leaves me an emotional and intellectual puddle listening to this coming from him.
And then Abe came the unexpected appearance of Kenneth Chenault, the former 17 years the CEO of American Express. American Express is a credit card company that charges 29.99% interest if you're late for a month's payment. So generally speaking, credit card companies not the most popular of businesses, I would say. People sort of like the mail. You open the mailbox and you get that bill, and your your hands are shaking when you open it to see what horrors lie within.
It's like putting on someone from the IRS.
Yeah. So he said, I spent 17 years running American Express, one of the great American companies. So I think that may be the only moment in the 4 days of the convention in which someone will say that anything other than a teachers union or a state government as a large-scale organization in America was any good, right? I mean, except maybe for the U.S. Olympic team. So that was striking. And then, as I say, what he said was Kamala Harris understands that, American business needs this and that and the other. And it needs a government. It needs a government that can function. Now, he did allude to things that you have to sort of hear, with very sensitive ears. It's the idea that government should somehow incubate small businesses and help pick winners and losers to help companies, achieve their full potential. And again, remember that American Express is not a company that makes anything. It's a company that basically lends you money till payday so that you can buy things, which is not exactly it's not a productive part of the economy. It offers you credit, which is a very important aspect of capitalism. But what he, as in his professional experience, knows about how a small business grows and that makes something is probably relatively limited. But he described a Kamala Harris that doesn't exist. Kamala Harris has never worked in the private sector. Kamala Harris is literally a 25-year employee of, goes to law school. I mean, she worked at McDonald's, as we heard, 340 times last night. She worked at McDonald's for a time. So did Doug Emhoff. Mazel tov to all that. By the way, there was a point at which 1/5 of all Americans had worked at McDonald's. I think that was 30 years ago, but McDonald's was the first job of an astonishingly disproportionate number of Americans.
By the way, this is also a reversal on the left. McDonald's has been hated in recent years, right?
Oh, yeah. It gives you high blood sugar.
Food it just exists to poison minorities.
Supersize me. Yeah.
Also
supersize me, guys.
Also the jobs. So far, both nights of the convention had people talking about J.D. Vance escaping Appalachia to Yale, where he became, he couldn't get away from his working class or whatever middle class roots fast enough.
So just one more point about Ken Chenault.
Yeah.
He's part of the Harvard Corporation. He hired Claudine Gay, and he resisted firing her. And I think that we should understand he's one of the reasons he's become so politically active was as a result of 2020 and the racial reckoning. And so he's very much now, leaning forward in the idea that corporations need to be much more politically correct, much more active in race and ethnicity.
Right.
And so that was left unsaid as well.
Well, maybe that's why he could appear in the first place.
I think that's why he's such a big backer of Kamala Harris.
Right.
So after Chenault,
before we get to Chenault, let me just talk to you about Boll and Branch, because we're going to hear later that Matt couldn't make it through the entire evening. Had to hit the hay. It was time, and he might have had a better sleep last night, maybe be a little less dyspeptic had he been sleeping on Boll and Branch sheets, which are basically there are sleep hacks to make you have a good time in bed. Noise machines, no snacking at night, yoga before bed, that kind of thing. But you know what? Just transform your sleep by buying Boll and Branch. The signature hem sheets from Boll and Branch are a bestseller for a reason. They feel buttery to the touch, super breathable, perfect for both cooler and warmer weather. Those signature sheets are made with 100% organic cotton using the highest quality thread on earth, and they come in 10 versatile colors in all sizes, from twin up to California king, loved by millions of sleepers, fit the deepest of mattresses, and are labeled with top and bottom tags, so making your bed is easier than ever. And best of all, Boll & Branch gives you a 30-night worry-free guarantee with free shipping and returns on all U.S. orders. So listen, sleep better at night with Boll & Branch sheets. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets when you use promo code commentary at bollandbranch.com. That's BOLLANDBRANCH.com, promo code commentary for 15% off plus free shipping. Exclusions apply. See site for details. So, Matt, continuing on the roll call of the states, what followed? Ken
Okay, yes, and I just, before we get to the big three speeches, there were two other observations I wanted to make. The first was, after Ken Chenault, they played a bio video of Kamala's background in law enforcement. It was an interesting video because you got to see clips of her really at the beginning of her career as the San Francisco DA. And it was just funny to compare her look and her tenor then with kind of the ultra progressive that she ran as in 2020, and now the new happy warrior, queen of joy, Beyonce Freedom candidate, who she's very changeable. It's fascinating. But that wasn't what struck me about the video. What struck me about the video was one of her quote former colleagues was saying about how Kamala had to respond to a rise in guns, gangs, and drugs in the San Joaquin Valley in the early part of the 21st century, and how she had to fight all of this social pathology that was coming up. And never once, apparently, did the words illegal immigration occur to anybody involved in this fight against crime, that maybe the gangs were coming across the border from Mexico, and that was the actual source of the problem. That was what you did not hear in the video. I'm not surprised. Then the video ended, and we heard from Angela Brooks, the Prince George's County executive who's running for the Senate in Maryland, and who is also a friend of Kamala Harris, known her for some time. And my reaction to that speech was, I felt bad for Larry Hogan, the very popular Republican governor, former Republican governor of Maryland, who's now running for that same seat, because Larry entered the race for Senate at a time when Joe Biden was consistently losing to Donald Trump in the polls, making this potential pickup for the Republicans. He then, though, drew the wrong opponent. Angela Brooks was outspent by an incredible amount of money by Congressman David Trone, who's one of the founders of the Total Wine business and a many millionaire. And Larry Hogan against David Trone, was not a very good candidate, would really increase this potential for a Republican pickup. But instead, the Democrats now nominated Angela Brooks, who was very impressive, I thought, in her speech. And then, of course, making matters worse for Larry, Biden dropped out of the race. And so now you have Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket with Angela Brooks as the Democratic Senate nominee. I think it's going to be an uphill fight for Larry Hogan in Maryland.
Feels that way. So she was good. She didn't say anything particularly memorable. I do think that we have this quality now where every candidate is saying, I'm a friend of Kamala Harris's. We had that moment, Jasmine Crockett crying bitter tears over the overwhelming quality of being in Congress, and Kamala bathing, like drying her tears and saying, God said you're where you want to be. People are always, Trump does this, all politics. They're like, she's my friend. He's my friend. My friend. And my friend, Tim Walz. And, I bet half the people have never met Kamala Harris or Tim Walz. Like, my friend Tim Walz will do that. Maybe they met at some, fundraiser where there were 22 people in the room or something like that. Like the disingenuous nature of the way people talk about their intimacies, particularly politicians who, of course, are glad-handers by definition and want to make thousands of people think that they're their best friend. I've told this story before, but there's a politician in New York City named Peter Vallone. He was the head of the New York City Council. He ran for mayor. He ran for other offices. He was a very gregarious, charming, like classic New York kind of guy, And so Peter Vallone, I probably met on 10 different occasions. And I'm not sure that he really knew who I was, though I was at the time somebody he should know because of it was like running the New York Post editorial page, stuff like that. But I mean, he knew hundreds of people. Said to me every single time, he said, "John, look at you. Have you lost weight?" Every single time, right? Because it's like trying to figure out fat guy, say he lost weight. He's going to love me. He'll love me forever, right? So this whole Kamala Harris is my best friend. I've known her forever. I heard, said Angela also Brooks, about this young DA in California I needed to get to know. Really? Did you hear about her? Because she was going out with Willie Brown? I mean, how would you have heard?
She said in the speech, she read an article in Essence. That she read, so there was an article in Essence magazine that she picked up, and that's how she heard about her.
Okay, I mean, how many prosecutors are there in the state of California? How many prosecutors of color were there in the state of California in 2005?
But you would admit that Kamala Harris has been on track to become the president of the United States now for about 20 years.
So it would appear.
Isn't that clear from everything we're learning?
Fair enough.
And the one obstacle on her course was herself and her performance in 2019. That's why Obama was so angry. Obama wanted her in 2020.
Yes. Okay. So Angela also Brooks, and then was this, and then came Doug.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we could all agree that Doug Emhoff blew the roof off the United Center. That was trying to think of spouse speeches aside from Michelle Obama's in 2008 or Barbara Bush's maybe in 1988.
Laura Bush's was good in 2000, 2004.
It's okay. No? I don't remember. I mean, but
what about Melania? You didn't like Melania's speech in 2016? I liked Melania's
when I heard it from Michelle.
Right.
Because it was previously from Michelle Obama's speech. Literally.
Hillary Clinton has been giving spousal speeches at conventions for a very long time now.
Okay, Doug was better than Hillary's speeches.
Yeah. Anyway, he was, whatever you want to think about him, talk about the scandal involving his first marriage, all of that. He was charming. He was fluent. He was fluid. He looked like somebody who had been to the manor born to do this. The crowd loved him. And he said some things that were very interesting and actually kind of offensive, though you'd have to kind of dial back a little bit to understand what was offensive about it. I mean, the most important being that he said that marrying Kamala Harris brought him closer to his own religion, even though they are of different religions. And that she will go to high holiday services with him, as he will go to Easter services with her, and that she makes a mean brisket at Passover.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are not Jewish, it's a very, very touchy and difficult subject to talk about. But, and Doug Emhoff, to be fair to Doug Emhoff and Kamala Harris, they married later in life. He'd already had his children. They weren't getting married to build a Jewish home or, the second marriage. Jews are sensitive on the subject of intermarriage. It is a very touchy and difficult subject in almost every Jewish family.
Well, I just want to say,
yeah,
observant Jews are touchy on this.
Wasn't this his first?
This
was his second intermarriage.
Yeah, it was his second intermarriage. it's not just observant Jews, to be fair. And this is why I wanted to get, like, I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this delicately. People for whom Judaism is very important to them, let's not just say that observant people who are like Sabbath observant, kosher keeping, day-to-day Jews who daven Shacharis and all this. Like, Jews for whom Judaism is important are made, at the very least, uncomfortable a little bit by intermarriage, because intermarriage has a record of taking Jews out of their faith. And this is a tribal religion. It's very complicated and all of that. And generally speaking,
I'm just saying the rates, the intermarriage rates are what they are. I mean,
right. I understand that. But what I'm trying to say is,
I mean, a good point to bring up here is the fact that the reform movement just like 2 months ago started, announced that they would begin ordaining intermarried rabbis. Ordaining as rabbis, clergy who were intermarried. So this is, and that caused a bit of a storm, obviously, even in the reform movement. But this is the fact that hadn't happened yet is a testament to the fact that even outside the observant sects of Judaism, there have been lines that people have been very nervous to cross.
That's a very good point. Well, all I'm trying to say is this, which is that when you are showing sensitivity to a minority, particularly a religious minority's concerns, because you want to show that, because this is America and we are a pluralistic society with freedom of religion and everybody's religion should be respected and all of that, you will tend to err on the side of the people who take the religion the most seriously, and not on the sort of sociological side of, Islam is great. I like hummus. I really enjoy going to, a Moroccan restaurant. And Jews do this themselves. And Doug Emhoff is such a Jew, obviously. Like, he went to Hebrew school and he loves brisket. They used to call people Fiddler on the Roof Jews, right? I love my Judaism. I cry every time I see Fiddler on the Roof, and I like bagels and lox. Bagels and lox was the term, not brisket. That was the sort of generationally the term that you're a bagels and lox Jew. In other words, the way you celebrate your faith and your history is that on Sunday morning you go out and you get bagels and lox and salmon and cream cheese, and then you do that. I don't think that anybody but me, or there are various people, but I mean, I'm only saying this because I think it needs to be said, not because I think there's any political liability to it, or that he doesn't represent, as Abe indicates, a strong majority of the Jewish people, particularly Jews who would vote Democrat, who are probably more bagels and lox Jews than they are. But it's also after October 7th. People have raised consciousness. And I just don't think we could pass over the idea that saying that somebody intermarries and then gets closer to their faith because they married somebody who is not in the faith, that is not an inoffensive thing to say to Jewish people.
Maybe he didn't even have brisket on Passover prior to marrying Kamala.
She's supposedly a great,
because she loves to cook. Right, we know that about her.
Everybody says she's a great cook.
So maybe that was how he became a better Jew, was by having brisket on Passover.
But we should also note that
small steps.
When they made him the anti-Semitism guy in the administration, and he talked about embracing his faith, one of the first things he did was he went to Rosenberg's Bagels in Denver, and that was like the Biden administration was saying, "Go be Jewish." Right. And so they literally sent him to a bagels and lox.
Yeah, there's a Woody.
Can I pick up on that?
Go ahead. Sorry,
because you're right, Seth. He's the anti-Semitism guy, but is he the pro-Israel guy?
No,
I didn't hear that last night. And you know what? The best way to fight anti-Semitism is to support the state of Israel, who are fighting the enemies of the Jewish people.
The word Israel was not spoken last night or the first night. Now, you could say that happened because the Democrats do not want to give an opening for
bigots in the room,
to the bigots to start shouting "Free Gaza" or booing Israel.
They did anyway with the Biden speech, right? They've unfurled the banner.
Yes, right. So that is a sensitivity to this issue that they are showing in a weird way that should be noted. You know, the problem, we're now like, and we haven't even gotten to, but the Emhoff speech was important. That humanized him and humanized Kamala. People want to like their president and their president's spouse. It's actually very important to people that they like the president. This president's spouse is a secret weapon, always has been. Barbara Bush was more popular than George H.W. Bush. Barbara Bush probably didn't really deserve it because she was actually quite a cold and difficult person. Nonetheless, seemed like America's grandmother, that kind of thing. There's actually an interesting new biography out of Pat Nixon, which I've been reading, that sort of shows the incredibly difficult road that she had to follow as the wife of the vice president and the president. Yeah. So it's very important, and they of course play behind the scenes political roles and all of that. And we have to note that, you know, Donald Trump is on the campaign trail without his wife, who is nowhere to be seen, and has basically decided to.
She did come to the final night of the convention.
She did, yes.
She entered very elegantly to the opera aria, and then sat there, and then surprised Trump when she showed up on the podium to hug him. Just one more thing about this.
Usha Vance is playing a more typical spousal role.
Yes.
Doug Emhoff had one line that really struck me. He said, Kamala is going to be there for all of our kids. All of our kids. We're going to Kamala. And then earlier in the evening, the host for the evening, Ana Navarro, told the world that Kamala is going to give us hugs. It's going to hug everyone. And she's going to be we're basically marrying Kamala Harris if we elect her president.
And Raphael Warnock said that the role of America was to make sure that no child on the planet Earth gets a cold. Okay, so I mean, this is a very deep. I mean, you know, you've just scratched the surface of the kind of degeneration of collectivist communitarian thinking that we're now in a place where we want our president to get right. But this was Drew Barrymore, right? Kamala Harris was on the Drew Barrymore talk show, and she said, "Can you be everybody's mamala? I want a mom. We all want a mamala." It's like, I have a mother.
Do you remember?
Can we say, like, also the Tim Walz daddy stuff? We should mention the Tim Walz father.
But this is interesting because wasn't it Chris Matthews like a quarter of a century ago said the mommy party and the daddy party?
Yeah.
We're finally getting it.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's
this 24 years later or whatever, it's really coming true. When you think about the gender gap in this election, when you think about how Trump represents masculinity for many young men, and then
this
Kamala
thing about
now
the
is going to give us all
floor.
hugs. It's fascinating, this divide now. And the men, this is the follow-up point. The men in the mommy party, Doug and Tim, they're kind of goofy. You know?
Right. They're like the goof. They're like
the goofy dad. They're the dad from Modern Family.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. They're Ty Burrell or the dad on the commercial. Right. Yes. The classic dad on the commercial,
the goofy
who
dad.
Doesn't know his ass from his elbow. Right. That's
how Democrats view now the role of men.
Okay. So we should get to the Obamas because Obama said something interesting about Tim Walz in this respect. But then there were a couple of Tammy Duckworth spoke, was the senator
she was good.
She was fine. I mean, there were a couple of other things, and then Michelle Obama came out, and what can you say about that speech?
You can say a few things.
He's lucky. We as conservatives are lucky that she did not enter politics.
Well, it's the very fact that she never
that's what I can
gives
say.
Her power.
Fair enough.
She is a cultural figure.
Yes.
And she always delivers the best speech at the DNC.
Yeah.
Since 2008, I can't think of someone. I mean, maybe Bill Clinton in 2012 got the better of Michelle, but she has delivered this version of the speech she gave last night now 3 times in 3 successive conventions, 16, 20, 24. 16 was when they go low, we go high. Remember that? Yeah. 2020, she talked about the pit in her stomach and how everything was on the line. And now 2024, this was a really interesting speech because she went low. She finally went low. And the core of the speech was when she filleted Trump.
Yeah.
Without saying his name. But it was an interesting way she did it, because when you read the text and kind of try to ignore the delivery, which is very hard because she is the best. I've long thought this, that the Democrats have. It was very left wing. She talked about the affirmative action of generational wealth. So are the Obamas going to say that Sasha and Malia aren't getting any inheritance when they move on? Are we against passing on stuff to your kids? I get what the point she was saying, but it's still, when you think about it, what's going on here? She talked about, Kamala's truth. And then it was very racialized. She said that the reason that Trump went after Obama, President Obama, was that he was uncomfortable seeing successful Black men and women. And then, of course, the line of the convention so far.
Yeah.
Right? Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently speaking is one of those black jobs he keeps talking about? Brought the House down. It's going to be quoted
and deservedly. Years. And deservedly. Look, I said this on Twitter last night. Like, I'm a former presidential speechwriter, and I made a freelance living for several years writing a speech. I mean, I tip my hat. That was a soundbite for the ages. One of them black jobs, I believe, is how she put it.
Yeah,
that was an absolute banger of a moment, and you have to aesthetically, at least in terms of performance and writing, it doesn't get any better than that in terms of public speaking, at a political event.
I just wonder, as we talk about how this election will be determined, how that line works, right? I mean, it might solidify more African-American voters for Kamala Harris to have the Obamas come and talk about Trump's racial politics. But is that necessarily the way to win the independent voters, to win the working class voters in the Rust Belt? It's not clear to me. It's very good speech. I'm not saying it wasn't. But people have to remember, as they sing the Obama's praises, that they have a very complicated political legacy. And that when Barack Obama left office, what was his legacy? A ruined Democratic Party and Donald Trump. And he's been trying to repair that now for 8 years.
Right.
It was also done specifically for that reason, though, because remember that after Obama left office, the talk among Democratic Party leaders was, how do we keep the Obama coalition together? And then that was part of the who should follow him up? Should it be Hillary Clinton? Who's his true successor? Who can keep the Obama coalition together? And nobody was the answer for a couple rounds of presidential races. Even Biden's win in 20 was closer, but Biden had sort of brought it closer because of his friendship with Jim Clyburn and how that had helped him in the primary and what South Carolina had done to propel him. But the Obama coalition, the Obamas came out there last night because they want the Obama coalition to stay together. And no one besides the Obamas has yet been able to do it.
Okay, so the coalition of the ascendant was assembled by Obama and appeared to be an artifact of Obama. That this was not, in fact, a way station, a journey of the Democratic Party that was inevitable. And this election is going to test the question of whether or not they can bring the old band back together, because, of course, we have a test case of this in 2 states, Georgia and North Carolina. So Georgia and North Carolina are sort of like there's a lot of young people in both, and there's a lot of black people in both, and Obama won both, and of course Biden won Georgia by
Obama didn't win Georgia. Biden won Georgia. Obama won North Carolina in 2008.
That's right. So Obama won
North Carolina
and Biden won Georgia. So the question is, can those cut? And of course, can that somehow be brought back? They're both Georgia's a jump ball, it appears. North Carolina is a hard state for Harris to win, but if she wins it would mean that she would win the election. It would mean that message somehow worked, that she was able to stitch together a coalition that will be larger than just what North Carolina would show. So that's an interesting, as they look at their path, they're trying to figure out how they can thread the needle if they can't improve themselves with white working class voters in the three Rust Belt states. And that's clearly a thing that is very much on their minds.
One last thing on Michelle. The speech was a rebuke to Biden implicitly, a point that Playbook makes very well this morning.
She never mentioned Biden's name.
Nope. And she talked about how awful things have been, but now Kamala is the light. And then, again, something you have to kind of read into, she did say that she was not planning to address the convention because of the recent death of her mother, Michelle Robinson. And I wonder, had Biden stuck it out, would Michelle have appeared?
Well, we're told that it's personal, right? We are told that
it's personal. She was friends with one of the exes, I think, Bo's widow, or one of the Biden, or maybe one of Hunter's exes. It's
and was disgusted by Joe's treatment,
by the way that Jill and Joe have treated this person. So it is personal, and she did not do what her husband did, and maybe that now we can talk about the husband. Her husband did praise Joe.
One more thing about Michelle here. I think also part of Michelle's coming out here last night, she sort of tried to sort of conjoin herself with Kamala. Her story is we grew up very far apart, but in very similar circumstances. Her story is my story. She was trying to sort of get some of her own magic to rub off on Kamala, which is not something that would have been sort of conceivable if Biden had been running.
Well, they're 2 days apart, which I think is interesting because if, as Barack Obama said when he showed up, I'm the only guy stupid enough to follow Michelle Obama at a convention, and they've never spoken on the same night before.
Well, Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris have a great deal in common. For example, they both grew up in Montreal. I mean, I'm just saying, like that whole thing is like
Michelle Robinson
black,
was not
I'm
a
black.
Berkeley professor.
They're also very good friends with Tim Wall. Old friends with Tim Walz. My friend Tim Walz.
Right. So I mean, it is a peculiar thing to say. There's a lot in common. They have nothing in common except that they both went to law school. As far as I can tell, they literally have nothing in common.
Princeton graduate Michelle Obama.
HBCU graduate Kamala Harris.
Right.
Yeah.
So Michelle, she gave her stem winder, clearly the best speech so far of the DNC, and she stayed there and took in the applause and said, "I have one more job, and that is to introduce my husband." And she said something that I glommed onto. She said, "I know he wakes up every morning thinking about how to make this country better. Let me introduce to you the 44th president of the United States." But you know what?
And the love of
the
my
current
life.
president. He's the current president of the United States because he's clearly been running everything. And he came out there and essentially delivered one of the State of the Union or countless 41 Obamacare speeches that I had to endure during his presidency. And it was as though nothing had changed, and it drove me crazy. And then I went to bed.
Okay, so let's quickly talk about Obama. So Obama did, as he often is a much nervier speaker than we give him credit for being, because he says things, he speaks, he is as disingenuous a person as has ever existed.
Incredible.
But he infuses his disingenuousness with some form of fake authenticity, by which I mean, best decision I ever made was picking Joe Biden. He's my brother.
My brother.
And, he was a superb president. He did and he sacrificed for the future of this country. And I'm proud to call him my president. And I'm even prouder to call him my friend. And there is Joe Biden with Barack Obama's knife sticking out of his back. And it will be sitting in that back until January 20th. And we heard that one of the reasons that Kamala left Chicago, according to a report yesterday, I don't know if it's true, but I enjoy the idea of it. So I'm going to report it as though it's true. There was a sensitivity about not wanting to appear on stage with the Obamas at the convention because Biden's people are still very sensitive about the role that the Obamas played in his defenestration, which is to say that Biden's like, you screwed me in 2015 by telling me you weren't going to support me if I ran for president. I don't know, whatever. And now you have taken the presidency away from me. And Brutus is an honorable man because Barack Obama butter wouldn't melt in his mouth about the person that he arranged this defenestration. And look, politically, obviously, he did something very sound and savvy and wise. And hats off to him for pulling it off in Nancy Pelosi. But I guess he had to do I love Joe Biden like a brother, but he loves him like Abel loved Cain, or like Jacob loved Esau.
When the Miami Heat were gunning for a championship in the early aughts, Stan Van Gundy was their coach. And Pat Riley, who was the legendary Hall of Famer, was the president of basketball operations, whatever. And he fired Van Gundy and became the coach, and just sort of took over the entire team to finish the run and win and get the championship. And Bill Simmons said one time, he said that it was nice of Pat Riley to remember to wash Stan Van Gundy's blood off his shirt before accepting the trophy. And that's what this kind of looked like.
Okay, so that was to me was politically an interesting moment. And I think everybody who watched the speech, in fact, because he was right to say, I was stupid enough to follow Michelle Obama. And then he did one of those weird things that he does where he sort of indicates that they have a terrible marriage in some weird, it's like, no one loved his mother-in-law the way I loved my mother-in-law. And you know why? One of the reasons is that she had my back when Michelle got angry at me. All he ever does is talk about Michelle being angry at him.
Well, there was
just like in a book, it's like she has the moods of a summer storm.
There was
this memoir. Oh my God.
That he's talked smack about how her memoir, Becoming, I think the first book, which is now it's close to the Bible and how many copies it sold.
Yeah.
He's jealous of that and tells people that, well, Michelle's book was ghostwritten. And he wrote his unreadable first volume of his presidential memoir himself.
He's written three
Don't
memoirs.
say it's unreadable. I read it. I read every last word of it. And
it goes up to 2011.
I know. It was only readable in the sense that I read it, if you see what I'm saying.
Okay, you read it.
It's like stereo instruction. If you really need to read stereo instructions, you can get there. But anyway,
I'm sorry you had to do it.
Her book has sold sold 4 times the number of copies of his book, but Becoming has sold 15 million copies or 18 million copies worldwide. And his, remember they had a kind of joint book deal. They got $65 million together
with the
for both
Netflix
books.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
All the tropes. Can I just say very
Yes.
briefly, all of the Obama tropes were present in this speech. The straw men, the false choices, the assertions of bad faith on the part of his political opposition. He goes on for, he talked about how Republicans are only out for themselves. He literally said they're poisoning the rivers. Republicans are poisoning the rivers. And then in the next sentence, in the way that only Barack Obama can, he said, but we can't divide this country in 2 parts. We have to come together. And he threw Granny under the bus. He had that line where he said, look, when grandma or grandpa says something that makes us cringe, that doesn't mean they're bad people. And then he, in a separate section where he made a similar point, he goes, it just means they haven't caught up with the times.
Yeah.
So the whole bitter Klinger analysis, all
still
over
there.
His speech. He has not changed one iota.
Yeah.
And again, this is what makes me think this election is still a toss-up.
Okay.
Because you can't, there are so many people who would look at that speech and say, really?
Okay, so Obama did the Ken Chenault thing also, and there's a weird sentence in the middle of the speech where he was talking policy about what she'll do, right? And he said, Kamala knows it's hard out there to get a house because there are not enough units. So he said, quote, we need to build more units and clear out the outdated regulations that have made it hard to build. Clear out the outdated regulations. Obama increased the size of the regulatory state. Did he change OSHA regulations to make it easier for building contractors to build houses to lower their costs? Did he do anything about ADA requirements that add $100,000 per unit to the cost of building units? Many, if not most, apartment units in the United States per unit. Of course he didn't. He made all that worse. What is the evidence that she's going to come along and deregulate the housing and construction industries to make it cheaper? She needs to. This is a major, if you want to talk about wonky right-wing politics, talking about the increase in costs laid on by regulatory efforts to, create accessibility and fireproofness and this and that and the other thing. We got 40, 50, we got the public interest to the national interest to the Competitive Enterprise Institute to AEI to everybody writing screaming papers about this on the right for 40 years. And have they raised an eyebrow toward us?
I think this is an important point because, look, I said earlier that Bernie is the id, he's anger, he's going to be what we get. I could be wrong. I'm often wrong. And the alternative is we get Obamaism. And Obamaism, of course, is unpopular on the left wing of the Democratic Party because Obama is considered by the left to be a neoliberal, someone who is much more interested in cultural politics and the social agenda of the left than the economic agenda of the left, right? And it is possible, knowing Kamala Harris, knowing how she came from Silicon Valley, from San Francisco, the Bay Area, she's came of age in the political monoculture of California, that she is more in line with Barack Obama's economic policies, despite running as a socialist in 2020, than she has led on. And it could very well be that a Harris administration would be a return to Obama-style neoliberalism and the agenda that Ezra Klein writes about in his New York Times column, which is essentially what Obama laid out in ascribing these views to Kamala Harris. Now, what I think is funny about that is not necessarily the Biden agenda. The Biden agenda is now referred to as neo-populism by New York Times columnist David Leonhardt. So under the surface, there is this, I think, internal tension within the Democrats between the neo-populist Biden agenda, which of course Harris has been a part of, and the Obama neoliberal agenda, which Obama and maybe Harris seems to be moving toward if she becomes president. We just don't know. Like the healthcare bill, we have to elect Kamala Harris to find out how she will govern.
Well, there's two issues where that's really come out recently, right? One is Lena Khan, Federal Trade Commissioner, who there was a story last week about a major donor to Kamala's campaign just sort of coming out and saying, I'd like you to fire Lena Khan. She is the monopoly slayer. That's how she views herself. But also Lena Khan has come up as an ideological hero to the left. Because she has sort of based her career on going after monopolies and this sort of thing, and even seems to have designed, and this is the interesting part, seems to have sort of designed her worldview around how can I eventually kill Amazon, which is, and that's sort of at the heart of this. And then the other issue is the housing, because you have had the neoliberal versus the left on this. You have had YIMBYs versus NIMBYs, not in my backyards. This has been ongoing for a while now. The left is having an internal fight over whether just build more housing is the way to go, or whether you should use a sort of more left-wing policy approach and all the regulation and all this and that. But anyway, Kamala comes from a kind of battleground zero of that world, because she comes from the Silicon Valley area, which was the first place where this really exploded because of the inequality and because of the way that Silicon Valley turned into a place
and
where
it's still
became successful and said, I don't want to see another house for 7 miles.
Right. Well, this is a huge look. Housing as an issue on the left, is a 70, 80 year issue. And the way that it was finessed between when liberals in the left and Democrats really weren't particularly capitalist in their orientation, or did not have to sort of take account of capitalism as a better functional system than top-down government spending. Most Democrats believed in direct federal and state government building.
Right.
I mean, that was 50s, 60s, 70s. That was the construction of these giant housing projects in city after city and place after place that became disastrous, nightmarish hellholes. Slum clearance leading to these giant projects that, for example, in Chicago, just a mile from the United Center, the Cabrini Green housing project was literally blown up 30 years after it was built. Cabrini Green, the home of Good Times, The Family, and the 670 sitcom, working class black, that became a nightmarish, drug-addled, crime-infested place that was destroyed, as was the famous project in St. Louis and stuff like that. Democrats lost that issue because their issue was, we should do it. Government should do it. Build housing. Now, nobody really can advocate for that. But as this is going on, they're layering on, as I said, regulatory demands on private building and landlordism and all of that make it so that when you build a unit in the United States, it's very hard to build one at a modest cost that you can rent out to people of modest income, because the sunk costs of building per unit are way, way out of line with what a person who makes $40,000 a year can pay to help defray the cost of running the building and paying off what it costs to construct it. So I'm perfectly happy to have this argument. We got 10 billion pages of proposals on this that the right has been coming up with for decades. And this gets me to my other point, which is, he said this thing about how we need to have to disagree. We should all be friends, and all of that. And he, which was striking to me, because he also, said his grandma, and Shasha and Malaya's grandmother, so similar. Women of wisdom, modesty, right? Michelle said her parents didn't think that you should take more money than you deserved, or something like that.
You
or
needed,
which is a bizarre thing to say, and parse that.
From each according to his ability, to each according to his need.
And that, but she came from Peru, Kansas, and his grandmother, and, like women like that, full of common sense, but modest. And people like this, they didn't want much. They got down to business. They went every day to their modest jobs, their modest work, and they didn't see play. They wanted their children to go see the places that they would never see, and they wanted to go places. They wanted their children to do things that they would never. That's the backbone of them. That's what my white grandmother and Sasha Malay's black grandmother have in common. And this is a horseshit line that, Obama's grandmother moved from Kansas to Hawaii and became vice president of a bank. She wasn't living on the south side of Chicago her entire life. They have nothing in common. Barack Obama's grandmother was an ambitious, tough, resourceful person who took a journey to an island in the middle of the Pacific and worked her way up from teller to the vice president of a bank. And he's like drawing her back into the lower middle class in order to make a political point.
Obama and Kamala have something in common, which they both have sisters named Maya. Obama's half-sister is named Maya, right? Maya Sotora Eng. And then there's Kamala's sister, Maya. So I just thought that was interesting. I've been meaning to find an opportunity to point that out. Maybe that's a good sign for Kamala.
Thank you. Okay, and I want to make one final point about Obama's speech and what he said.
I hope. Yes. We have to go low here because this is what everyone's talking about. The crowd size line.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, in one of the gazillion shots taken at Trump of the night, Obama said, and he's got this weird obsession with crowd sizes, and then he made a sort of hand gesture to sort of indicate Trump's manhood.
Yeah, the relative paucity of his manhood.
Yes, right.
Yes. So,
but that's not where you were going to go.
No, but I think it's an interesting point because clearly, look, they had the rally last night in Milwaukee to get under Trump's skin. Obama did that trolling line about crowd size, which of course is a weird echo of Marco Rubio talking about his hand size,
right?
At one of the debates in 2008 that Rubio then apologized for. They're just trying to they're trash talking Trump. They're trying to knock him off his game. They want him to get ugly and nasty. And
that was my big takeaway from the night. By the way, this was all aimed at sort of playing Trump like a
just getting under his skin. But the final thing is when he said, and this related to the grandmothers and all of that, that what we wanted to do was get back to an America where we care about each other and we look out for each other. Get back to an America. They're running. They have the presidency and the Senate. This is a democratically governed United States. They have a majority of the state houses, of the governor's mansions in the United States. If we have fallen away from being a country where we care about each other and look out for each other, that's right now on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump is not the president of the United States. He was kicked out because Biden made the case that we wanted to get back to normalcy, which presumably meant something more like we care about each other and look out for each other. And it's very nervy. That's what I mean. Like, he's pretending like Trump is the president and that we need to restore Democrats to the White House. It's their White House. I don't know.
Also, people still care about each other. It's so ridiculous to say that we don't care about each other.
Charitable country on earth. More Americans give more money to charity.
It's Obama's view of America. If he doesn't have his way, America's at fault. There's something wrong with us if Obama's not getting his way. And right now, there's a chance Trump could win. Hence, Obama's not getting his way. So in order for us to be a good country again, we have to put Kamala in the White House so Obama can tell her what to do.
Okay, final thing. I'm sorry, we are going very long, but I mean, it's a rich subject. Obama talking about Tim Walz. And this is where the weird Obama condescension, this is a flip side of the bitter clingers to guns and religion and talking about the people who won't vote for him because they're from, these unwashed places where, having run the Harvard Law Review and all of that is not really looked on very well. When he said about Tim Walz, let me tell you something. I love this guy. You can tell those flannel shirts he wears don't come from some political consultant. They come from his closet, and they have been through some stuff. So it's like, I love this guy. He's like one of those low rent guys who buys the house brand at Walmart, the George shirts at Walmart. They've been through some stuff. They've been through it. Because, I'm wearing my Xenia suit and my Brioni shirt and my $2,000 tie. And I love seeing a guy in a flannel. I just love it.
At which point the cameras cut to Gwen Walz, who did her frenetic clapping, head shaking thing again. Yeah. So she loved it.
And part of the Walz style, by the way, it's the camo cap. We should know. Camo cap is for that's like their big seller on their campaign, with people are making a big deal about it. There was an article, I think, was it in Rolling Stone the other day, where the genius of the Democrats co-opting the camo hat.
John, you should know, though, I mean, Walz was in Congress for a while, so Obama probably did encounter him. I mean, he didn't
encounter him in a flannel shirt. He wasn't wearing no flannel shirt on the floor of the house. I'm just saying that it had this weird quality, because this gets to how we're going to have White Night, as Seth sort of began the. So we're going to have White Night, and it's going to be all this, that thing where he started talking about how Trump, didn't know the state beverage of Nebraska, and didn't know anything about that, and then this bizarre attack on J.D. Vance for having gone, somehow eliding the fact that he went into the Marines and then went to Ohio State, the state college of his state, because he had needed in-state tuition. No, it's like, so he went to Ohio. No,
he ran away to Yale.
He ran away to Yale,
like he's a Bush.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is. I mean, again, they're trying to get under their skin, and so that's. But I mean, it is pretty. When Obama does the liberal condescension to the rock-ribbed Americans who shop at Walmart thing, he thinks he's getting away with it, but I think this is your point, Matt, which is he doesn't really get away with it.
No.
They know who the people, that is something for people from Chappaqua and Shaker Heights and Winnetka and Mill Valley and every really affluent suburb to go, I love that Tim Walz. He shops and he buys a shirt at Walmart.
Wherever the Obamas have homes, and they have like 4 of them now.
Yeah.
Northwest DC, Martha's Vineyard, Chicago, and I believe they have a California home too, and a Hawaii too. They probably have 5 homes now. Wherever they have homes, those lines go down really well. But I just have to keep reminding myself, this is a big country. 330 million people. There are 50 states. It's huge. And they don't all think like the Democrats.
Right. All right. We got to run. Gone on too long. So we will be back tomorrow. For Abe, Seth, and Matt, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.